This is Sal, and you are listening to the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast on the BS Podcast Network.
In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cutillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
The Wild Wild West. When I roll into the Wild Wild West. When I stroll into the Wild Wild West. When I bounce into the Wild Wild West. Cisco, Cisco. Now, once upon a time in the West, madman lost his damn mind in the West. Love less, kidnapper down, nothing less. Now I must put his behind to the test. Then through the shadows, in the saddle, ready for battle.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is Thursday, May 4th, and this is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast. I think I did better that time coming in. I think that was better than last episode.
Thank you. Worse.
Thank you for coming back after last week. Actually, I shouldn't even say that because Steve Marcus, who's here again tonight. Hi, Steve.
Yes.
He was good.
Hello.
Sal Lito, who also here tonight. You were good last show, so thank you for that. What's going on, Sal?
Buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Greg Allman was a great guest.
Yes.
What people heard of it. And
I felt a little empty after listening to his running back response.
Yeah, the running backs may have left something to be desired. Not Greg's fault. I'm going to go with technical difficulties or user error. You guys can pick.
Blame the editor. Blame the guy who edits.
That's true. Steve did edit it. Maybe he screwed it up.
You know what? I'm not even justifying that with the response.
That
not
would be a response. Listen, I have to start off the show by saying happy anniversary to my lovely wife. Thank you for allowing me to podcast on the night of our wedding anniversary. So I appreciate that. She's great. I love her. She's the best.
It's not like she was expecting anything else.
Yeah, well, no, there's no question about that. So
that's good because I was going to steal that as my final thought. I was going to wish you guys a happy anniversary. And last year, I remember we actually interviewed Chris Harris on my very first wedding anniversary.
That's correct.
Thank you to the wives of Falafel for hating us so much that you don't care that we do this podcast.
Yeah, the good news is we could podcast any day of the week, 365 days a year. My wife doesn't even speak to me anymore.
Well, yeah, which is actually probably an improvement for her overall because you're not really fun to talk to. So
I've been told I'm fun to talk to, but
really?
Usually that's
Steve, is Sal fun to talk to?
You know, he's got his moments. I mean, you say you say that one wrong thing, and it's just an instant flip of a switch, and he becomes your worst enemy.
You're saying I got a short fuse?
No.
Oh,
What have I ever done?
I would never
answer.
say that.
You're saying I'm gonna not have you bleep this
Calm.
out. All right.
Calm.
Wow. Oh, all right, guys, we got a little hot. I that's probably my fault. The pre-show prep got a little heated, so I apologize for that. That was me. I went in the red, and I apologize. We'll take it down now, and we'll go along. We're going to continue through the draft, our analysis in the slightly different method of going team by team through the divisions to sort of give our take on how they did an overall draft, and most important from a fantasy aspect. We are going to do the West today, as I'm sure you've all figured out by now. Any thoughts?
I'm a fan of the West.
You just the West in general?
Yeah. You know, we
use
on the
wrong
Fantasy
time
Life
zone.
app where we talk to a lot of our fans and a lot of listeners. Not a lot of West representation. So a lot of East Coast bias. And so when we get a chance to talk about the West, it makes me a little happy that you guys are forced to talk about it.
Our listeners are
East Coast is
predominantly
the best,
yeah.
so.
Our listenership is predominantly East Coast. I think New York and Boston are clearly the favorites.
Yeah, I don't know.
Forget how popular we are in Germany.
No, that's right. We are huge in Germany. It's very strange.
Guten Tag, everybody. Guten Tag.
Is that thank you? Bless you? What is that?
I'm pretty sure it's like good day type of thing.
Oh,
I don't know.
good.
I actually did take a semester of German in college, but I also did a lot of other things, so it doesn't really
Whoa.
stick.
Wow. Let's we're gonna move along. So we're going to start off with the NFC West. Unfortunately, we don't have any outside talent joining us today and being able to take us intelligently through some of this. So you're going to have to deal with just Steve and Sal and myself leading the way, which good luck to you. So
dangerous.
We move along. We're going to start with the Seattle Seahawks, who basically did nothing from a fantasy perspective. They had 12 overall picks, though. That is insane. That's a lot of players to be adding to your draft, or to your team, I should say, through the draft. And it's interesting to me because they didn't have a pick in the first round. They didn't pick till pick 35, and they still managed to get 12 picks in, mostly defense, or offensive, useless players in my mind. So, look, they took. We'll start with the center in second round, 58th pick, Ethan Pocic. Anybody?
Pocic?
No, I didn't pay attention to him because I don't care.
Oh, he's out of LSU, so I'm sure she's very talented. And look, they also took an offensive tackle in the sixth round, 210th pick, Justin Senior, offensive tackle out of Mississippi State, who I believe Steve has a full workup on, right? Yep.
Listen, he had Justin Jr. He made a mistake.
That's a good one, Sal. I'm very impressed with you. You're starting off good. All right, so look, obviously they needed some offensive line help. That was probably the worst part of their team last year. I'm pretty sure, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Pro Football Focus ranked them dead last as far as their offensive line, and just overall a mess. Now, they do have 18 running backs on the roster, I think, currently, including Chris Carson out of Oklahoma State, who they drafted in the 7th round. So there's a lot of running backs. There's obviously Russell Wilson, who likes to run the ball quite a bit and would like to throw the ball downfield. So they do need some pass protect. They do need some run protect. I don't know that drafting a 2nd-round center and a 6th-round tackle is going to get it done.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree with that. As anyone who listened to the podcast during the season last year, I had Russell Wilson, and he was just running for his life basically the entire season.
I think he ruined your entire year. You were very miserable.
Yeah, and it was all because of him. I blame him entirely for that. So
Sal, remember how whiny he was?
Man, it was bad. Even for me, it was bad. So I don't understand. They traded out of the first round. And they did address their offensive line first with their first pick. We all know that this was not a huge draft for offensive linemen. So it's understandable that they did that, but I don't feel that they did enough. Their first fantasy relevant pick that they got was in the 3rd round. That was Amara Darboh, a wide receiver out of Michigan, who is a very decent sized wide receiver. He's 6'2", 214. So he fits in very well there. They didn't have that big guy that could, go and high point a ball and maybe take. They've got a lot of speedsters. They got a lot of possession guys. So he is definitely not like the other receivers that they have on the roster, but he was the 3rd round wide receiver. He's not exactly the type of guy that's going to blow the roof off your doors, as one Matthew Berry would like to say all the time. And so I'm not impressed with their draft at any point. They did sign Eddie Lacy in free agency. I'm not sure if we've had a show since that has happened. So, they've got Eddie Lacy, Thomas Rawls, CJ Prosise. They've got a cluster blank in the backfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fare this season. A lot of hype around Russell Wilson coming into last year, and I think the year that he had scared a lot of people off. So I, for one, was not very impressed with their draft this year.
Yeah, but so we definitely have had a show since they've signed Lacy. I don't know where the hell you've been, but you got Lacy, Rawls, and Prosise, right? So they weren't going to spend high
Chris
picks
Carson.
but I'm saying they weren't going to spend a high pick on a running back. So, and the kid that they brought in, this kid, how do you say his last name? Darboh. There you go.
Darboh.
I combined his first name and his last name. He's quick also. I mean, he ran a 4.45 at the combine, but he's bigger than the other wide receivers. And let's face it, Curse and Kevin's lover boy over there, who just never seems to pan out every year. They haven't stepped up. So he wasn't one of the highest.
This is the year.
Oh God, it wasn't one of the highest touted wide receivers coming in. But again, he's a guy that if you want to grab him late, $1 to $5 bid in an auction, or grab him in the 5th round of a rookie draft, and stash him, he put him on a taxi squad. He might be a guy who earns a spot on the roster. The other guys, David Moore, I think, was the other wide receiver that got taken in the 7th round. He's a guy who probably will not end up making the team, maybe practice squad. If he does anything, it would be from a kick return standpoint. But, I think the Seahawks try to rebuild that offensive line, and they also drafted quite a few guys in the defensive backfield, if I'm not wrong. So they're trying to also rebuild that area of the team as the other guys are starting to get a little bit older. There's a lot of talk of Sherman being sent out. That doesn't seem to be something that's going to happen now, but maybe he doesn't play there beyond this year. So, I think they did what they needed to do. It wasn't a great draft, but
yeah, I mean, Steve's complaining aside, I do think this offense is pretty well suited. They do also have Alex Collins, who was a draft pick last year, I believe. I want to say 3rd round, but I could be wrong on that. So they have a lot. They have a lot of running backs on this team. They needed to shore up the offensive line, as we talked about. But I think outside of that, I don't know if I agree with you that they needed much from the wide receivers. It would be nice to have a big, tall wide receiver, but you have Jimmy Graham, who's one of the best, post-up receivers out there. While he may be a tight end, but he's one of the best red zone threats you can have. And I think he while he tailed off a little bit towards the end of last year, he was pretty solid for the majority of the year. So hopefully the second year back from his injury, I think you can expect even more out of him again. So I don't think they needed to do much, and obviously they didn't. So, hopefully the offense, Russell Wilson stays a little healthier, and they, some of these offensive linemen actually do help out. So we'll see about that. But I think they, addressing their defense was probably not a bad solution or a plan for them. So we will move along and continue on to the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers had 10 overall selections. They were picking number 2, so obviously, they made the big deal of the draft by trading the 2nd overall pick to the Chicago Bears, who traded up to 1 spot, giving up what? They gave up their 1st round, a 3rd, and a 4th, and a 3rd rounder in 2018. So a lot of picks for them to trade up and get their quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky. Meanwhile, the San Francisco stays back and takes the guy that they probably wanted to take anyway. But they had 10 overall selections. They also didn't do a lot of addressing in the offensive area, at least in the early part of the draft. They didn't pick an offensive weapon until round 3, which was 104th pick, which was a quarterback, C.J. Beathard out of Iowa. They also took Joe Williams out of Utah, a running back out of Utah, in round 4. George Kittle, a tight end out of Iowa, in round 5. And Trent Taylor, a wide receiver out of Louisiana Tech, in round 5. So some decent mid-round selections there. Sal, you got any thoughts on any of these particular guys? For me, I think the one thing that's interesting before you do give your thoughts is that the quarterback in the 3rd round is a guy that we didn't hear a lot about before this draft. We didn't, nobody was really touting him as one of the higher selections, and yet you see him go in the 3rd round. Obviously, a new regime in San Francisco brings him in. You got to think that they have some pretty decent expectations for a guy like that.
Yeah, he went with I believe Dobbs and Peterman was still on the board when he went, which surprised a lot of people. So he played a pro style offense in college out of the shotgun, but he's a project quarterback. I don't think he'll end up being a guy long term. And quarterbacks is such a crapshoot. Even the guys that go in the 1st round, half of them don't pan out. And that might even be a high number, saying half of them. So, I don't think this is their Tom Brady gem finding it's only 3rd round, but a little bit later. The guy, and I know Steve wants to talk about Joe Williams. I'll just say, the guy ran for 1,407 yards in 9 games last year, and he is the perfect scheme running back for this particular coach. So I won't get too far into that, Steve. I know you did your research on him. George, go ahead, buddy. You want to do it?
I was just gonna say I did. Go ahead. You can go ahead. I'll get my time. Don't worry.
Actually,
George Kittle.
We were done with you for the night.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
George Kittle's a guy that could be a sneaky good tight end in the NFL. Again, not one of the bigger names, but he is a complete tight end. And McDonald is there. They gave him a contract. I was down at McDonald last year. He ended up having a pretty good year, and I actually grabbed him in a couple of places this year in startup auctions. So I don't like him to unseat him just yet, but he could be a sneaky good player. The other guy, Trent Taylor, wide receiver, guy will probably end up being a punt returner. He's a small guy, 5'8", but last season, 136 receptions, 1,803 yards, and 12 touchdowns. So he had nice numbers. Played at Louisiana Tech. Again, there's room for people to make a name for themselves on this team. Right now, I think everybody's going to be up for position battles. I don't think anything is won outside of Carlos Hyde and maybe Pierre Garçon. But so some of these guys might be able to get a spot, and they might be worth a late flyer in your drafts. Steve, let the people know about Joe Williams and how much you love him.
Oh, I will absolutely do that. Real quick on George Kittle. I agree. He is a very prototypical tight end. He's not going to blow you away with his quick cuts or anything like that with a lot of the tight ends that were drafted early, like the David Njoku and Evan Ingram. But he's kind of sneaky fast. He's 6'4", 247, but his 40 time was a 4.52. So once he gets going pretty good. So that is what he does have going for him. But talking about Joe Williams, yeah, I was very impressed with watching the tape on him. He's got very nice footwork when he's running through his holes, and he's one cut, and he has got some burst on him. So I really like him as kind of a sleeper running back. When Carlos Hyde gets hurt this year, that he is going to have an opportunity. I know that they signed Tim Hightower through free agency, so he's going to have a role there. But I was very happy with what you saw from Joe Williams. He doesn't have a lot of film because he was playing in Utah behind Devontae Booker, who was drafted last year by Denver. So he didn't get a ton of playing time, but when he did get that shot, Sal gave you the stats that he had this year, he was very productive for Utah. So I'm a pretty big fan of his, and I was pretty happy to see that he went to a team with an injury-prone running back in front of him.
And the 49ers moved up to get him in round 4. They traded up, so that means they wanted him. It wasn't just, okay, we'll take him in his spot. So I think that means that they have a role for him. They cut Mike Davis this week. We know that it's a little crowded over there. They traded for Capri Bibbs. They signed Tim Hightower. But this kid has a real legitimate shot at, if not some playing time this year. Again, we know the injury history with Carlos Hyde, so it could be a good flyer for you.
So the only thing with Williams, I think you're right. He could be a good flyer, and one of the reasons he slipped down in the draft, I think, is his overall, a lot of concerns about his commitment to football. He actually retired for a month, apparently, and then Utah had some injuries, and they actually got him to come back. But between that and he got kicked out of UConn at one point, and then on top of that, the guy fumbles, right? He's lost 6 fumbles over 289 carries at Utah, so that's an issue there. So I think those things are the reasons he fell down in the draft a little bit further than he might have been had he been a clean prospect. So those are some things you want to keep in mind with him, but definitely if you can get him in a late round flyer, he's probably not a bad choice, because I agree with you, San Francisco is a decent landing spot where there will be some opportunity for him. So,
Kevin, before we started the podcast, you dropped something, and we didn't cut you from the show for that. So stop judging people.
I was gonna say one of the only check marks I had against him was that he holds. You can tell by watching the tape that he holds the ball away from his body, and he's got that thing, wrapped in his hand, but it is flying all over the place. So I'm not surprised at all that he's got fumbling issues, and it is absolutely something that he's going to have to work on.
All right, anything further on the San Francisco 49ers before we move along? Nope. All right, good. We have a lot of teams to cover still. The Arizona Cardinals had a rough year last year, obviously. They are looking to rebound. Carson Palmer obviously comes back. Larry Fitzgerald comes back. What could be their final year in the league. It sounds pretty much like Carson Palmer said, this is it for me. Larry Fitzgerald just seems to be always on the fence as far as retiring over the last couple of years. So they're going to be looking to rebound here. For them, I think they needed a little help on defense, and they sort of took that approach, starting off with a linebacker and a safety, in the first 2 rounds. But then got into some offense in rounds 3, 4, and 5 with pick 98 was Chad Williams, a wide receiver out of Grambling State. Round 4, they 115 Dorian Johnson, which was a guard out of Pittsburgh. Round 5, 157 Will Holden, an offensive tackle out of Vanderbilt. And round 5, pick 175 TJ Logan, a running back out of North Carolina. I will say, again, this is another team that did have struggles on the offensive line as well. So those middle round offensive linemen could help this running game. I was a little surprised they didn't, think to address running back a little bit earlier in this draft. Obviously, you have David Johnson, but he is carrying the ball at an astonishing rate to start his career, and I don't know that you want to keep doing that with him. So I was a little surprised there. Steve, any thoughts on that, on running back, and whether or not they addressed it early enough?
Yeah, I think when you have a guy like David Johnson, you kind of gives you a sense of comfort that you have this guy that has been able to shoulder this load, and you don't really think about it. I know when you're drafting for fantasy football, you draft David Johnson in the top 3 picks because he is that type of workhorse. So I can't fault the Arizona Cardinals for having that same type of mindset. Obviously, it's a little more serious when you're running an organization, and you have to your job is to think about depth and that kind of thing. So I think grabbing a guy that they feel comfortable with in the 5th round is okay, because I think that the guys that they got ahead of him, Hassan Riddick and Budda Baker, I think those guys are very, very solid defensive picks. And in the NFC West, that kind of seems to be their thing. All of these teams seem to focus a lot on defense and then let their offenses kind of come second after that. So I'm not very surprised at what they did. Chad Williams, their 3rd round pick, he's a pretty nice wide receiver. They've got Larry Fitzgerald. Like you mentioned, he's not going to be around forever. Chad Williams is not going to be the guy that replaces him, but you could do a lot worse than him. He's got really nice footwork off of the line. He high points the ball very well. He could do it a little bit more. Sometimes he does let the ball get a little into his body. He's a good route runner. He catches the ball well in traffic, much like Larry Fitzgerald does. But they've got issues on that part of the ball. They've got John Brown, who had all the injury stuff last year. They've got Jerome Brown. They've got J.J. Nelson. A lot of these guys are under contract that are going to be running out at either the end of this year or the end of next year. And then with the looming retirement of Larry Fitzgerald, that is also a position that they needed to make sure that they shored up. So I think that in this division, I think that they had one of the better drafts. 49ers would be first, but the Cardinals would be second. So I don't really have a lot of issue with what they did.
From what I see, Chad Williams was more brought in to fill in the Michael Floyd role that was vacated. But good points about the other contracts expiring and them needing to make decisions. So again, a guy who had 90 catches, 1,337 yards, and 11 touchdowns last season could be another guy you'd want to consider late. Not somebody you're going to spend a high rookie draft pick on. The thing with Logan, Logan is a small guy, right? He's not going to be built to basically spell David Johnson, but he had the fastest 40 time out of any running back in the combine, 4.37, and he catches the ball well out of the backfield. So I think that he has a role on the team, possibly kick returns in the first year, but maybe they don't want David Johnson playing third downs. I mean, he's not this year. I'm saying going forward, they might try to spell him a little bit, and he might get some run in that area. But David Johnson's my favorite running back in the league right now, so I don't know if that's going to happen.
I actually agree with you there. He is the my favorite running back in the NFL as well, Sal. So that's good. We got that in common.
Aww,
that's nice.
He's my second favorite,
behind
Ezekiel Elliott. I love that guy. I've become smitten with Ezekiel Elliott.
Well,
what are you gonna do?
Maybe if you're lucky, I'll come up behind you and pull your boob out.
What?
I don't
even know.
That is a St. Patrick's Day reference.
I mean, Jesus Christ! You never heard about him going up behind that woman at the parade and pulling her bikini top back?
All right, I think we should move along.
Kevin, these things are the people need to know.
Yes, they do need to know. All right, let's move along. The LA Rams had 7 overall selections in this draft.
That's it?
Yep, that's it. They took 7 players. Interesting for a team that really doesn't have a lot of talent. So they were obviously void of a first-round pick thanks to the Jared Goff trade of last year. So I think they're still looking at Jared Goff and maybe hoping that will work out at some point. I don't know that it will.
Panning out.
Yep. But in the second round, they did take, at the 44th pick, Gerald Everett, the tight end out of South Alabama, who a lot of people really, really like in this position. Tyler Higbee was a guy last year who was one of those guys that people thought could be, an athletic tight end. They really could make some catches. He didn't do much last year, so people were thinking maybe this year. And then they go and draft a tight end in the second round. So that kind of hurts his value a little bit. Meanwhile, they continue on in round 3 at pick 69 and take Cooper Kupp, wide receiver out of Eastern Washington. I don't know how many times I heard comparisons to other white receivers for Cooper Kupp, so I think it's, he's pretty much only allowed to be like a Julian Edelman. But
except for he's like 3 feet taller.
Yeah, well. Round 4 at pick 117, they take Josh Reynolds, a wide receiver out of Texas A&M, who a lot of people are saying is better than Cooper Kupp. And then in round 6, a fullback at pick 206, Sam Rogers out of Virginia Tech. So let's start with you, Sal, this time. You're the big tight end guy. What do you got on Gerald Everett? What are your thoughts there? Are you as high on him as a lot of other people are?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think that him and Higbee together are both going to get play in that offense. The new coordinator is Sean McVay, who ran the offense in Washington, right? And what did they use the most in Washington last year? The tight end, the most usage of a tight end for any team in the league. So I think both of those guys are going to line up in some 2 tight end sets, and they're both going to get used. So, yeah, Everett is, again, not one of the guys, not one of the top 3 tight ends that you spoke about the most, but another sneaky guy who might be someone you could grab for a fraction of the cost of those other 3 tight ends. I'm gonna bring up another white wide receiver, and I hate doing that too, but it's just a guy that he reminds me of from the standpoint of, reliable, good hands, and somebody that will be great for Goff. And that is a person whose son was also drafted this year, Ed McCaffrey. That's the guy closer to size, like Steve said, to McCaffrey than a guy like an Edelman. And just very reliable. I'm sure when Steve was little and he had his little John Elway pillow and he used to fall asleep drooling on it that night, he used to think about how he would complete those first down passes to McCaffrey. That's the guy I personally feel he is going to be most like. And then, Sam Rogers is a guy I like that they're bringing him in. Maybe that helps out Todd Gurley and helps a little bit more protection with Goff. And I like what they're doing with this offense. I think they brought in some good weapons the last couple of years, and I think that they're going to be much improved on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I can't disagree very much. I know Gerald Everett, it is a little weird that they spent their first draft pick of the year on a tight end in a position that they addressed last year with Tyler Higbee, like Kev said. He's an athletic tight end. He's been compared kind of to an Evan Ingram type in this draft, but when you look on NFL.com about his NFL comparison, they have him written down as compared to Quincy Enunwa, which is kind of weird because he's a wide receiver. So, watching a lot of his tape.
Anu was huge, though.
Yeah, it's just odd. It's just odd to have that type
You're
of
odd.
comparison.
Wow.
Yeah, that's established. It's been well established. So
let's power through, Steve.
All right, we're getting through. Cooper Kupp, we talked to Matt Waldman about him. I'm a big fan of his. I like the fit that they have there. I think that I agree with Sal. They put a lot of weapons around Jared Goff, so I like the direction that offense is moving. Josh Reynolds is a guy that a lot of people are happy about, but I didn't see a ton from him when I watched the tape on him. He's a big guy, 6'3", but he's only 194, so he's probably going to have a little trouble getting off the line with the bigger defensive backs that might be in press coverage because they don't have a set wide receiver 1 on that team, really. They have Robert Woods, and that's not someone that's going to demand DB1 coverage. So Josh Reynolds could absolutely see the best defensive back from any team. So that's just something that scares me a little bit. But he's got good hands. He's a high ball threat. He's going to be a nice red zone target, that's for sure. So just overall, I like the way that the Rams did address this draft. They didn't have very many picks, like Kev said, but they seem to be spending them in the right spots. So not overly thrilled, but I'm not disappointed either.
Should also be noted that they went out and signed Andrew Whitworth, left tackle, and they're going to be moving Greg Robinson over to I believe they're going to have him play guard this year, so that might help shore up the offensive line a little bit. Maybe we can get a little more out of Todd Gurley this year. I also like the Lance Dunbar signing as like kind of a third down change of pace back. Obviously, the guy, whatever he is off the field, and the fact that he's also had some injuries, but he is pretty shifty and can catch the ball. So hopefully he's helps out spell Gurley a little bit as well. So, overall, I think the Rams will be a better offense this year and going forward. And I do like some of the guys. Josh Reynolds, I do like as a late-round pick. I do like Cooper Kupp, although I think he's being a little overdrafted from what I've seen so far. So, overall, I do like where they're headed. You guys ready?
Kev, before you move on, I heard when you said get Todd Gurley some help, Steve said, yeah, you sold him. You sold him yesterday for less than you paid for him like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, you took a hit, man.
You are not. You don't you ever celebrate.
But he does have him. He does have him in falafel.
Oh wow! What, you get a win last year? 1, 2.
Wow, that was.
I think I ended with 4.
You cut him.
All right, it was enough. The answer was it was enough.
I had 4 wins by week 4 last year.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Do you have a trophy?
How'd you finish?
I could bash it ahead with a trophy.
All right, we're gonna move along to the division, which should spark some controversy for the rest of the show, as it is the division which contains the 2 favorite teams of my co-hosts here, the AFC West. But we are going to start with the new city LA Chargers. Obviously, they are moving to a new city, and I don't know why you'd want to leave LA or San Diego. I mean, I get it, LA's nice and all, but San Diego's beautiful. So. Anyway,
I hear there are a lot of less jerks there too. So.
Money.
That's true. It's all about the money. That was really creepy too, Sal. So, anyway, let's move along. They had 7 draft picks, and of course, they started off with their 7th pick overall, Mike Williams, the wide receiver out of Clemson. They moved on in round 2 and at pick 38 and took Forrest Lamp, a guard out of Western Kentucky, who a lot of people were predicting would go in the first round. They continued in round 3 and took another guard, Dan Feeney, out of Indiana. And then they finished up in round 6 for their offensive line, taking Sam Tevy, an offensive tackle out of Utah, at pick 190. So not a lot of fantasy-relevant picks here, except for the big one, Mike Williams. And, Steve, I know you're a Williams guy, so take me through it.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that they took Mike Williams there. I think had Jarrell Adams slipped past the Jets at number 6, I think that would have been their pick. But when he went...
Did you just say Jarrell Adams, the tight end out of New York? Sal's boy?
Yeah, did I misspeak? What's his name?
Yeah.
Adams? Jamal Adams? Jamal Adams.
Well, I just thought it was funny because it was Jarrell Adams, and that's obviously
son of Jarrell.
Man, Sal has talked so much about Jarrell Adams that it's just been imprinted into my brain.
Now he's going to be buried behind Evan Ingram.
Forever, for the rest of his career.
Forever.
Exactly. So Jamal Adams, I feel like they would have taken Jamal Adams had he been there at number 7, but he was selected by the Jets. So they went with Mike Williams. And although wide receiver didn't necessarily seem like a pressing need for them, they did have Keenan Allen coming back from injury, but he has had a few of them, so they're a little worrisome there. They have Tyrell Williams, who came on a little bit last year, and then they signed Travis Benjamin to the start of last year as well. So it didn't seem like a huge need for them. But when you have a talent like him, Kev's right. I am a big fan of his. I would have had him over Corey Davis. I think that he does a better job attacking the ball when it's thrown to him. I like the way that he runs his routes better. I like the way that he finishes after he catches the ball and fights for his yards afterwards. I'm an overall bigger fan of his. And so I don't, and people were knocking this. They think that him going there with all these wide receivers actually is a hit on his fantasy value. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think top end wide receiver going to a team that also has another top end receiver on them already is kind of beneficial to them because, you have a guy like Keenan Allen, who is a possession receiver, not necessarily the same thing that Mike Williams does, is going to demand some attention. So that means that Mike Williams might get more plays often than not than a Corey Davis would, who's going to obviously be their number 1 wide receiver. They're going to get a little more freedom. They're going to get the second best wide or cornerback on a team's defense. So I think it can be very helpful for them. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I like the fit there. And I like what they did with the rest of their draft, getting offensive line help. They lost a few guys in free agency, and that should only help Melvin Ingram continue what he started last year at the running back position. So I like the Chargers draft.
Steve cannot get any names right tonight. Melvin Gordon is what he meant to say, not Melvin Ingram. But it's
everybody.
He's old. Steve, you're old.
These names, man, there's just not enough of them in this world.
Do we need
crazy
do we need another on-air firing? Is that
Nah, you guys can do that off air.
Okay. All
right.
I don't have a whole lot to add. Steve hit on the points. I think they went heavy on offensive line exactly for those reasons. Keep Rivers protected so he has more time to get the ball to these big wide receivers, and also so that Melvin Gordon can be more successful running the ball. I mean, Gordon's value was really based on the heavy amount of touchdowns he was able to get last year. He got just under 1,000 yards before he got hurt, but his yards per carry were not very good. So, I think the winner coming out of this would be him. And I don't know, what does this say for Tyrell Williams? That they may be concerned that he doesn't have the big pedigree, and maybe he would be just a one-year wonder type of thing, and or are they concerned that Keenan maybe doesn't come back complete healthy? So it can't hurt to have the extra wide receiver there, and a guy who a lot of people did think was the best wide receiver in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they just know they're not going to be able to pay too, right? So maybe they're, whether it's Keenan Allen or Tyrell Williams, they're only going to pay one of them. So to get another rookie in and keep that two wide receiver set that they have, or the focus that they have, might be the way to go. So that's another potential reason there. I like the pick overall. I think it's a little bit redundant from a fantasy perspective, so we'll have to see how it shakes out. And I love that they upgraded the offensive line. And I think overall, like you guys said, Melvin Gordon's the clear winner out of this for fantasy purposes out of this draft for the Chargers, because they didn't draft any other running backs. You still have Melvin Gordon and then Brandon Oliver, who I don't think is really going to eat into too much time for Melvin Gordon. So definitely the big winner there. All right, so let's continue on here. We have the Kansas City Chiefs, who I think made the biggest surprise in my mind of the first round when they traded up to get to pick 10 to take Patrick Mahomes, QB out of Texas Tech. Interesting trade, because I they needed a quarterback. You thought they were going to pick one. There were so many quarterbacks that could go in the first round in this draft. There's or slip to the second or third round, because the opinions on them were kind of all over the board. And yet they trade with Buffalo by giving them a first and a third round, as well as a first round selection next year, just to get up to 10 to get Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you got to figure that they heard somewhere along the line that someone else was going to take him, and that was just their guy. I like the pick for them. I like the fit. I wish they had gotten him in the second round, and I wish they hadn't given up 2 first-round picks for it. But, what are you going to do? Overall, he's a guy that has a lot of talent, could very well turn into a star in the league, could very well turn into a dud and be out of the league in 3 years, based on what, the reports that I've seen. Steve, did you watch any film on him? What are your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes, I think, is a project quarterback. I don't think he's ready to play this year, which with them having Alex Smith, he's not going to be asked to do that. So I think that's a good thing for him. I think it's a good fit for them. Andy Reid is a good quarterback coach, so I'm not worried about that. I agree with you. It's a lot to give up to move up, and all 3 quarterbacks in this first round, they're all traded. Teams traded up to go and get all of them. So that was very interesting. When Nick Whalen was on, he talked about him, and he spoke about how much of a project he is. So he would not have been my first choice for a quarterback. He would have been third at least. Him and Deshaun Kaiser probably would have been pretty close. I would have much rather had Mitchell Trubisky or Deshaun Watson. But I think it's a good situation for them. I'm not sure they needed to do what they did to get him. Like you said, they probably could have, or they probably should have waited until the second round to see if he was there, but the hype was getting pretty real from him. So I'm not surprised that they had to do what they did to get him, but I'm not sure if he is going to be all that they hope he is. He's a project, so it's going to be a big wait and see for them. I don't expect him to get any type of play this year. So,
yeah, listen, who's he most resembled to you? If you read all the write-ups on him and you watch him play,
it's Favre.
This guy is Brett Favre, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And Andy Reid has some history with with a young Brett Favre. I like this description. An NFC executive come out and said he's got a great arm and big balls, and he's mobile. So it's gonna take a couple of years, like you're saying. He's gonna go through growing pains. He's gonna be a gunslinger. He's gonna make those mistakes. But I think out of all the quarterbacks in this draft, that if he does hit, he could probably be the most exciting one. Who, I mean, if he could even have a fraction of the success that Brett Favre did in this league, and he's big. He's probably bigger than Favre was. He's got that ability to move around and improvise. He's got a big, strong arm. I'm actually excited. I'm not excited because he plays for the Chiefs, but I am excited that when he does get a chance to play, I'm going to be watching it. Brett Favre is one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks. I love watching a gunslinger. I know they're going to make you pull your teeth out sometimes and slam your head into a wall, but when they're successful and they're on a run and just flicking the ball all over the place, it can be a lot of fun.
All right, so offensively for the Chiefs going forward in the draft in round 3, they took running back Kareem Hunt out of Toledo at pick 86. Sal, I know you've done a lot of work on Kareem Hunt. Give me your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I mean, again, a guy, Spencer Ware is I'm like the Spencer Ware truther of the podcast, and he's a guy who I was really hoping once he got his shot to get, real true league carries, would be able to show people he's capable of doing it. And then they go out and get a guy who was like my favorite non-top 4 running back in the draft. Kareem Hunt he's just a do-it-all. He's not a big guy, but he does do it all. He had 1,475 rushing yards last year, and he added 41 receptions. And I think that's what his role will be this year. Spencer Ware does catch the ball, but he didn't do a great job of doing that last year. So I think Hunt comes right in and gets used in those third down situations this year. And he's just an exciting player. He reminds me a lot of Brian Westbrook, who's another guy that played for Andy Reid back in the Philadelphia days. And we all know that Westbrook kind of came out of nowhere and had a nice run for a few years in Philadelphia. So if he could be that type of player, I think that he could bring you 5 good years of fantasy success. And that's all you're going to be looking for a running back when you're taking him as a rookie. So, yeah, next level guy as far as what you're going to pay for him behind the 4 guys, behind Mixon, McCaffrey, Fournette, and Cook. So he's a guy I'm fighting for right now in one of our fantasy leagues that you guys know in the auction that we have going on. And I'm laying in the weeds now as the clock ticks down, but he will be mine.
Sniping. All right, so round 4, pick 139, they took a wide receiver out of Michigan, Jehu Chesson, who, if you don't know him, which you may not because he had a terrible 2016, but he was a guy who a lot of people were high on coming out of 2015. He had a big year. He had 50 catches for 764 yards. Had a huge game in the final game of the year, 207 yards and 4 touchdowns. So, I think he was the MVP of for Michigan. He was Michigan's MVP, and overall, he had a lot of talent. He did get injured at the end of 2015 in the bowl game, so that's why he was slow in 2016. People think, he's a guy that has a lot of good body control. He makes the catches. Not a high drop rate. Focuses very well, but and of course he's 6'3", 204 pounds, so that's a pretty good size. He had decent speed on the field, 4.47 740. So. He's a guy that in Kansas City, in my mind, I think that he can compete pretty quickly because, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't love the wide receivers in Kansas City. Macklin obviously has talent, but he's been terrible. The last couple of years. I don't see him getting much better. I just don't know that it's a great fit with him and Alex Smith. I'm not too big on either of the other 2 guys, Conley and forgive me, I'm blanking on the other wide receiver's name there. And obviously you guys know I'm not a Tyreek Hill guy, but Steve, any other thoughts on this guy or the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers?
No, I think you're pretty much right on par there. There's Jeremy Maclin, he's their obvious wide receiver 1. And then they've got Conley, they've got Tyreek Hill, and then they've got a bunch of guys that are fighting for playing time. So he is definitely a guy that will go in all kinds of drafts for extremely cheap. If you're in an auction or if you're in a deep roster league, you should be able to add him for next to absolutely nothing and just to see what happens, because it seems like a different guy on this offense from wide receiver comes out every single year. So it's definitely a name to keep track of. I am a Tyreek Hill guy. I like his talent. I like his skill set that he's got with that team. I like how Andy Reid used him last year. And Jeremy Maclin, although he has had a bad couple of years there, he is still a talented wide receiver. So I still think those are the top two guys there. But for Kansas City, the wide receiver position has been a problem with them for quite a few years now, especially with Travis Kelce being such a predominant piece of the offense there. So, yeah, definitely someone to keep track of, but someone that's not going to cost you anything to see what happens.
Albert Wilson, he was the guy I was trying to think of. All right.
Yeah, easily forgettable.
Easily forgettable, exactly. Any other thoughts on the Kansas City Chiefs before we move along?
Hate him. Also, thank you for Jamal Charles.
Oh, you'll be trying to push him back in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Whatever.
Sal has been off the Jamal Charles bandwagon since before the season last year. So
we just got a message in a group chat from Tony, one of the writers from the Falafel House website, and he said Jamal Charles is available. Yeah, he's available because he's not good anymore, and
that is not even what it says at all. That is not even a quote. How can you try to quote somebody and not even read it word for word?
He's giving his analysis of the.
He said he was available. Now I'm telling you why he's available.
Yeah. Try to keep up, Steve. Really. All right. So speaking of the Jamal Charles, he's obviously on the Denver Broncos, Steve's team, who made 8 overall draft selections in this draft. We all knew they were going with a offensive tackle. I think it was the worst kept secret in the first round this year. Garrett Bowles, the out of Utah, who kind of creeped me out, to be quite honest with you, with the displaying of his baby. But right. No, I mean, I get it, and at first I thought it was really cute that he brought his kid up there, and then it just got kind of creepy and weird. So
started asking the baby questions.
Yeah,
he wasn't answering. Yeah. He was very, very uncomfortable.
Tried to put the jersey on it. It was just, the whole thing was a little. It just got to be too much.
He's like great dad. He seems like a really great dad.
Seems like a good dad. Yeah, and hopefully he will, solve some of the offensive line problems that they've had, because clearly that was a struggle for them last year. It was not very good. They had holes kind of all over the place. I think, they needed some offensive line help, and by all indications, this guy's a mountain of a man, and he's, hopefully going to shore up the left side of that line. He's should be a true left tackle for them. So we'll see what happens there. From a fantasy perspective, they also took one of this show's favorite people in the draft. In round 3, pick 88, Carlos Henderson, the wide receiver out of Louisiana Tech, who obviously we spoke about quite a bit. I will say, I don't love the fit here. I think I've been pretty clear about that with you guys. I think he's a great player, and I'm just kind of sad from a fantasy perspective, because I just think in that offense with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, I think he's not going to get a whole lot of targets. I think he's going to be that deep threat, basically, and I don't know that they have a quarterback that throws that ball very well. So, he could, Steve, I think you and I had this conversation. You think he could take some short passes to the house, and that's true, but that's going to be a very boom or bust option in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. He is not a huge fantasy option for this year because they have those 2 wide receivers that you said. And even with Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch for a couple games last year, even those guys got over 1,000 yards each during 2016. So I think there is yardage to go around, but you're right. He's not going to have a huge fantasy impact, and that's unfortunate because he's a good talent. He's going to be a special teams guy for them. I would not be surprised if he came out to start the season as their punt returner and possibly their kick returner. He is a guy that when he gets the ball in his hands, he runs well in traffic. He's got great vision down the field. He can stop and go just as quick as everybody. He's got a top 15-40 time from the combine. And he doesn't go down very easy. He's a smaller guy. He's only 5'11" at 199. So he's not huge, but he doesn't go down. And I understand your question about the fit, but they've also been looking for a slot receiver for a very long time there. They've had those 2 main guys, but they've got a guy that they can run into the slot and can do something after he catches the ball. So I like his potential for the upside. I understand that volume is a question because they are prototypically a run first team. They like to run the ball. I think that they are going to be trying to do that. Like we just talked about, they got Jamal Charles, they've got CJ Anderson, they've got Devontae Booker. So they've got options all over. They also drafted Jake Butt in the 5th round, tight end out of Michigan, who is is the best prototypical tight end out of this draft. So they addressed all of those issues. Their offense is looking pretty good. Their defense, we don't got to talk about that very much. It's one of the best in the league. It's just a question of how the quarterback is going to be able to facilitate all of this and if he's going to be able to spread the ball around to everybody. So I understand your hesitation, but I do think that he is going to be a viable fantasy option in deeper leagues.
You know what? I'm a little mad at you now. I'm not going to lie, because you had to bring up Jake Butt before I got the chance. I had this whole thing worked out with tight ends and butts, and now you've already mentioned him.
You had a shtick?
I had a shtick, and we were going to, cut to Sal because it's his favorite position.
So rare that Kevin is funny.
Yeah, you've ruined it.
Funny away from
you've ruined it. So
all right,
now,
let's just take it from the top, like Butt was never mentioned.
I'm going to edit all this out.
Action.
No. All right, so no, obviously Steve mentioned it. Round 5, pick 145, Jake Butt, tight end out of Michigan, who in my mind, very very easily could have been the number 2 tight end taken off the board had he not had the torn ACL in the bowl game. Sal, I know that you must be salivating over this Butt because you're a big tight end guy. See that? I still
nailed it. He still nailed it.
Look, you're a big tight end guy, and this guy has a lot of talent, and he is slipping far in drafts because of the injury and because of his draft value in the actual NFL draft. So you've done a lot of work on Butt.
So are you slipping into Butt, Sal?
Well,
how many Butt jokes can we make?
I'm hoping to grab him in the back door because not a lot of people are ending up. Anyway, I think
you just overshadowed my joke there. You killed me because that was better.
Anyway, I think we're all anybody who's following. I'm a Michigan fan as well. He had 1st round talent, and the reason he fell so far is because that. But he also had an ACL injury to the same leg in 2014, so he has had it twice. So durability is a concern, but what you're going to pay for him comparatively to the other 3 tight ends is a fraction, most likely. He's a complete tight end, which means he's going to be on the field for every down. I think this instantly solves a big problem and something that was missing from this offense ever since Julius Thomas left 1 year ago.
Julius Thomas didn't block.
Yeah, no, I mean from the receiving standpoint, it's going to solve that issue that was missing. No, he's a complete tight end, Steve. This is a great pick for them. Again, very very upset that Carlos Henderson, who's one of my favorite players, goes to a rival. Kareem Hunt goes to a rival, and now Jake Butt, who's he's just firm, fantastic, and he has now also gone to a rival. So. Great picks. I think that the Broncos had a very good offensive draft. I don't want to say any of the other names because I don't know what Kevin has planned for them.
That's it. I got nothing. I'll be funny again next year. So
all right. So let's go over to a guy like Isaiah McKenzie, who they took in the 5th round. He's a wide receiver out of Georgia. He's a slight guy, 5'7", 173. He's a similar player to Carlos Henderson, not as explosive, but the guy had 6 return touchdowns in college, 5 punt returns, 1 kick return. He also had 4 rushing touchdowns as a wide receiver. So I think that they brought in these guys to do the things that Steve was touching on before. Maybe play more around the line, use their speed, their quickness, and their elusiveness to take it to the house. Carlos Henderson is a triple threat. The guy could run the ball, he could do kick returns, and he could catch the ball. So I think that these are guys you don't necessarily need to get them downfield. And so I really do like what they did there. I'm going to go into the assumption that Trevor Siemian's going to win the job and remain a starting quarterback this year. I heard something today, and I can't remember which podcast it was on. It might have been Move the Sticks, where they said, Trevor Siemian doesn't have the talent that Paxton Lynch has, but he works so much harder that if Paxton Lynch could just work the way that Siemian does, he'd be a phenomenal NFL quarterback. So I think based on that, it's going to be Siemian for now and for a while, and I think they're doing everything they can to help him out.
Kev, I'll interrupt because I'm sure you were just about to jump in, although I didn't hear you at all. So I'll edit all this out. Don't worry. What do you think about them taking Chad Kelly? What do you think about them taking Chad Kelly? Because that is also someone we asked Matt Waldman about, and he ends up going in round 7 as Mr. Irrelevant to Denver. So
Yeah.
what do you think about that kind of fit there?
I love personally. This is, I mean, as Mr. Irrelevant, as the 7th round pick, the last one in the draft, I think it's a great pick, right? Because I think as you mentioned, we talked about it. I was higher on him than most. I mean, obviously there's issues there, right? We talked about his head being the problem because he's been in fights, he's been in trouble, he's apparently got an attitude towards his coaches. He left Clemson. He was a community college guy, and then ends up at Ole Miss. But if you look at his overall attributes, the guy can make ridiculous throws. I mean, he has a cannon for an arm. He's got good poise. Sets his feet really well, I think. And overall, he's just obviously has a compete level because he's a fiery guy that's gotten in fights with people. So I mean, there's a chance he doesn't make the roster. There's a chance that he doesn't do anything. But in my mind, for a team that's, no offense, Steve, kind of devoid of a top tier talent at quarterback, why not?
None taken.
I mean, there's really, I mean, he could theoretically, I don't think he's going to compete in year 1, but he probably will make this roster. I don't think he's going to be cut. He could, maybe he gets pushed to the practice squad if they think they can sneak him through, or maybe he's the third string. And then next year, I think he could possibly compete depending on what they do in the draft. I think it's worth a shot. The knocks on him are really more off the field than on the field, except for maybe his size. I mean, he's only 6'2", so he's a little on the shorter size. He's only 224. But the arm talent's there, and if you can get this kid to focus and really, pay attention to what he's doing and learn, and maybe take coaching, then I think you're going to have a guy who could be a solid starter in the league.
Yeah, Mr. Irrelevant, maybe.
Exactly.
Because he's got the pedigree, right? He's got the family pedigree, and I agree with you, Kevin. The talent is there, everything is there. It's just, can somebody grab this kid, get his head screwed on tight, and say, listen, you got an opportunity that very few people get. Thousands of people would want, maybe even millions, and
maybe
settle
even
down.
hundreds of millions,
maybe even 100 million, and get your head screwed on and tight and mature. So, I figure he's going to hang around for more than a year there. I don't think that they'll let him get away.
I figured you were more of a mature guy, Sal. Just going to say that.
No, but I want to smack people who say that.
All right. Let's continue on. I should give Steve any thoughts on your Denver Broncos before we move on?
No, I was very happy with what they did in this draft. Them taking Garrett Bowles, the only thing I will say is that Cam Robinson was available there, but I will have faith in John Elway with what he saw in Garrett Bowles. A little bit quicker, somebody that can move around a little bit more. He's still a very big guy. I was just hoping that maybe they'd get the guy that could really just push people around. But I'm overall was very happy. I didn't think they needed to address the cornerback position. I believe they drafted a cornerback in round 4. And I don't think that they necessarily needed to do that so early. But overall, I have absolutely no problems. I'm very happy with Carlos Henderson, Jake Butt, Chad Kelly, Garrett Bowles. They addressed most of their needs. So no complaints from me.
And they got a new DeMarcus in the second round there. A new DeMarcus.
That's right.
To fill Ware.
That's right.
DeMarcus Walker out of Florida State to take the place of DeMarcus Ware. So, that'd be good.
Yeah, it'll be great.
All right, so let's move on to our final team of the night. Thank God, the
worst team.
The worst. Raiders. That is correct. The Raiders made 9 overall draft picks in this one. Only 3 of which we are going to talk about because most of them were not fantasy relevant. Sal, maybe you could tell us about some of the other ones if you really feel like it's when we're off air because we won't have time. Look, round 4 they took the pick 129. They took an offensive tackle, David Sharp, out of Florida. Round 7, 231, another offensive tackle, Jalen Ware, out of Alabama State. And round 7, pick 242, Elijah Hood, running back out of North Carolina. Sal, you are trying to get Elijah Hood somewhere.
Yeah, I'm trying to get Elijah Hood because he's going to be a cheap buy, right? And Elijah Hood is essentially he's not Marshawn Lynch, but he's a Marshawn Lynch clone. Like, he's a Marshawn Lynch style runner. It's who he says he emulates his game after. He's super excited. It literally said he was almost moved to tears when he knew he was going to be in camp with Lynch and getting a chance to be a teammate. So there's a really good chance that this guy's behind Lynch for a year, 2 years, learns from him, and makes the transition. He's a complete opposite of what Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington are. So it really is a very solid fit. If you could get a guy like that in the 7th round, and maybe 2 years, maybe next year he transitions in, and 2 years from now he's part of a 3-headed monster, which is just what we deal with now in the NFL with running backs. I love the pick. I love the value for it. And if I could also grab him, I did grab him in the 32-team league because 32-team single copy. By the time it came back around to me in the 2nd round, I was able to get him, which was nice. Yeah, and I like it. I mean, what more can I say other than that? If this guy's Marshawn Lynch 2.0, sign me up. I'm going to enjoy 1.0 this year and move on to 2.0 next year.
You said 2 years. He's going to have like 5 weeks to learn behind him before Marshawn ends up getting hurt, and he's going to need to be used there.
Yep, and in those 5 weeks, he'll gain more yards than Jamal Charles will in all 16.
Oh, bet.
Oh, you
bet. Make a bet.
Son of a bitch.
You two need to make a bet.
What do you want to bet? That Marshawn Lynch will have a better year than Jamal Charles? I'll take that bet right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to make that bet.
All right. Look, there's really not much else to talk about with the Oakland Raiders here. Sal, what about your thoughts overall on this draft?
Yeah, they focused on defense. They grabbed a couple of offensive linemen for depth, but they already have like a top 3 offensive line in the NFL right now. So those are just depth guys. None of them are going to play this year. And they shored up their secondary a little bit more. The pick, they got value in the 1st round, and let me just say, Gary and Conley, let's hope that none of this is true. First and foremost, from the standpoint that it didn't happen to a young lady. And that maybe this was just, somebody making a stupid claim that isn't true. If it's 100% not true, and this guy goes on to have a nice NFL career, then great. And I don't want to even say what great value it is or anything like that, because I need to have it 100% totally proven that he had no involvement in this before I get excited over it. But for
Sal,
where he
the
was
lie detector test, those are foolproof, right?
Yeah, no, but he did take one that day and he did pass it. So hopefully it turns out to be the truth. They went out and got a safety in the 2nd round to join Vance Joseph from last year.
Carlos Joseph.
What I say, Vance Joseph is your
yeah. Give me some more crap about getting names wrong.
He's your general manager, right?
All right, guys, let's move along. Getting along.
I just had it in front of me. Carl Joseph in front of me too, because I am old and I don't. I get names wrong, so I write them down now, and I still said it wrong. Anyway, I like what they did from a defensive standpoint. They didn't have too much to address on offense because everything is in place. I would say maybe we could look into a tight end going forward. I know they went and got Jared Cook this year, but Jared Cook is not young, and Clive Walford has been slow to come along. So other than that, I didn't feel like they had any pressing needs with the signing of Marshawn Lynch. So we could have had Dalvin Cook if we wanted them, but we didn't.
Most importantly is that they don't use the tight end, even if they have one that they could. And also, undrafted free agent Ishmael Zamora ended up going there, a wide receiver who obviously had a bunch of controversy going into this draft. I'm not a big fan of his.
Is that why you brought it up, just to say you're not a big fan?
That is why. I'm anxiously hoping that he fizzles out more than any wide receiver in this draft.
Nope, that's why he brought him up, because he wanted to use the fizzle.
I had one fizzle note on this agenda today, and it was for Ishmael Zamora. So I got that in there. I'm good to go. We can end this now.
Why do you want him to fizzle?
I just
dogs.
Because yeah, well, that's one reason. Because off the
do
field,
you need another reason?
Yeah, I did, because Steve says that he would draft Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon punched a woman in the face. So if you're okay with Joe Mixon, what's your problem with a guy who beat up dogs?
No, that is not the reason why. We're not getting into that. Morals aside and fantasy football aside, they are two separate things. So yes, both of them deplorable. Joe Mixon, Ishmael Zamora, you both need to be better people. On the field, Joe Mixon's very good, and I didn't see anything that Ishmael Zamora did that really made me super excited about him, that drew all the hype on him running into the season. I was not a fan of his tape. I saw him taking a ton of plays off. He's a big guy, he's 6'4", but he doesn't run crisp routes, and he's a long strider, so he takes a long time to get going. But once he gets going, he's pretty quick. So he's obviously a red zone target, but I was not impressed by anything that he did on the field, and even more unimpressed by everything that happened off the field. So it was just it was just somebody that, off the field stuff aside, I just was not a fan of all the hype that he was getting for his play, and I don't think he's going to amount to anything. And
I was breaking chops about him.
I know.
He's an undrafted free agent, and so just guys should take flyers on, right? As NFL teams should probably not be drafted or purchased unless it's a super deep league. I did try to get him for $1 in the Pigs 2 league because I only have $8 to spend. So him and Hood were two guys I'm trying to go for, and he probably will never ever see an NFL regular season game.
I'd rather have
We're
Katie
gonna move
Cannon, who is
along.
also an undrafted free agent who got signed by San Francisco. I'd rather take a shot on him.
Going to wrap this up.
We're not stopping till I say we're stopping.
Steve, why don't you just give us your
we can
finishing
stop.
thoughts?
All right, we're going to stop now. You can follow us on Twitter at Falafel House, and you can also find us at falafelhouse.com. You can check out our Instagram, which has evidently been dormant since the start of 2016.
New pictures coming tomorrow.
You can find that, and you can look for us on Facebook. Just search for Falafel House everywhere that you go. And once again, happy anniversary to the Cotillo family.
Thank you.
The whole family celebrating?
Every single one of them, all 3 of them, plus the dogs.
Pretty sweet.
That is true.
Sal, go ahead.
Yeah. I got nothing going on tonight. Thank you guys for listening. Steve gets to put all the social media plugs in there, and then Kevin gets to talk about our partnerships, and I'm just the idiot in the middle. So thank you for listening, Kevin.
We let you do that because usually you have interesting thoughts, Sal. So
yeah, I got nothing today.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Be honest, you got nothing mostly.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Just want to remind you that we are a part of the Dynasty Happy Hour podcast network. Definitely go over to dynastyhappyhour.com/podcast and check out the podcasts there. We would appreciate you giving the other shows in that group some love. I'm not going to go through the list tonight because we did it a couple days ago, so check out that episode. And if you are not a subscriber, it would be awesome if you were. So you should go to iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud or wherever and make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you can get the new episodes every day. Once again, I want to say happy anniversary to my lovely wife. Hopefully she's listening, but probably not. Thanks.
Not this long.
No, definitely not this long. And that's it. I think we did better than last time, but we'll try to do better next time. And until then, Steve, hit the button.